Hello everyone, this is Rick Russell. I'm going to diverge from my normal slideshow music video format today to make this video to tell you what is the most extraordinary thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. Today is the 56th anniversary of the day that I died in Vietnam in combat. That was on 30th of July, 1967. Now, leading up to this incident that I'm going to talk about, the 9th Marine Regiment, of which I belong to the 2nd Battalion of the 9th Marines, was ordered up to the demilitarized zone, which is demilitarized in name only. The enemy had been using it to infiltrate the South for many years. The 9th Marine Regiment was sent up north to the border, to the DMZ, and we were going to go into the demilitarized zone and act as a blocking agent or try to stop the infiltration across the area. The enemy was well prepared and had set up their defenses, were ready for us before we even got there. And so by the time we got up inside there, they ambushed us. We had a tremendous battle. It was the last time that American forces was in the demilitarized zone, in force, in the entire war. It was a hook-out battle, roughly 1,000 of them and 1,000 of us or more. Again, this is just a prelude to this. And then so the battle, we eventually were able to withstand their attacks overnight, and the next morning we were able to pull out of there. Now, we ran out of water about halfway through the night, which is not good in a tropical climate. And so the next morning, as we began to march out to come back south again, myself and a number of others were hit with heat prostration, heat exhaustion. Now, because we had no water and because it had been such an excruciating, lengthy battle, we didn't sleep really that night because we were under constant attack. So, pretty much completely exhausted, we started out of there. By the time that I got to about a mile from the battle site, my legs started seizing up, and I knew right away what it was. I'd had 5 different attacks of heat exhaustion in the war up to that point, and 1 heat stroke. So I knew that if I didn't get water and I didn't get care, that I was going to die, because heat stroke will kill you dead. And so I started hallucinating and was in real bad shape, was no longer responsible for myself and couldn't control what was going on with my anything. I was delirious, and it just kept getting worse. We finally got to a place where there was some water. They had put me on a tank, and we got to some place where there was some water, and I remember jumping into it and drinking as much as I could, but it was too late. It was already past that threshold. And so I was just not making any sense and kind of completely out of my head. And they picked me up out of the water, put me on the back of the tank with a mess of dead guys actually laying up on the vent where the heat comes out, which didn't help anything. It was heat coming out of the tank and heat coming down from above, and I was having a heat stroke. And so we got up to Thien, and I no longer could walk or could do anything, and they lifted me off the tank and laid me on the deck in front of the Thien battle base. Thien is Vietnamese for a place of angels. And that was where there was a big Marine base. And helicopters were coming in. And of course, this is all sketchy to me because I was in and out of consciousness from the heat stroke. But I do remember one incident where I was laying on my back and there was a big corpsman, a Navy corpsman, sitting on my chest, slapping my face and pouring water on me. Now I remember that part. And then I remember that they put me on a stretcher and they lifted the stretcher up. And when they took the stretcher inside the helicopter, and the second they set it on the racks, I was gone. I died right there, dead. And I didn't care. I was so completely exhausted, so completely worn out that I didn't care. I knew I was dying, I knew I was dead, and I didn't care. But then, the most amazing thing that ever happened to me happened. As I was kind of floating, or lofting, or flying around a little bit, I kind of went into what seemed to be an operating room. Now, it seemed like it was a small one, and it was a military one. And as I looked around, I could see what they were doing. They were operating on somebody on the table, but I knew it wasn't me, because I was nowhere near any of that. But it was a very odd circumstance. And I looked across to the other doorway on the other side, and I was floating like this, above the heads of the people on the doctors that were operating. And I looked across the room, and on the other side of the room, I saw a familiar face, which really startled me, because it was my grandfather, who had been dead since 1958. So 9 years he'd been dead. Yet there he was, floating on the other side of the same operating room for me, facing me. And we kind of drew together like this as we were floating, and he took his right hand and pointed over my left shoulder. And I could hear him think, telepathy, or I heard his thoughts, and he said, "It's not your time. Go back." And he pointed back over my shoulder. And I knew he was right. And in just an instant, I startled awake and came up, sitting into a sitting position, and looked down as I felt pressure in my chest, and there was a cardiac needle sticking out of my chest like Uma Thurman in Pulp Fiction, and it was going ba-bum, 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 like that, with my heart, which was beating again. The Navy corpsman on the helicopter, the second that I had died, stuck that cardiac needle right into my heart and filled my heart with adrenaline. And it worked. I sat straight up, was alive again. Now, it really surprised me, to say the very least, all of it. I was exhausted, and I was still out of it quite a bit. It took me 2 or 3 days to get back on my feet, but then I went right back up to the front again, as we always did in those days. There were a couple other things about this. My grandfather, as he was floating toward me, appeared to be all in white, dressed in white, a long white coat all the way down, almost ankle length. As he was floating, I could see it. 20 years later, I received a mess of pictures from World War I, my grandfather. And in those pictures, there was my grandfather standing with a couple of the nurses that he worked with. He was a Navy corpsman on a troop ship during World War I. And he was wearing the exact same long, ankle-length white outfit, long white coat, that he was wearing in that picture that he had been wearing. He had been wearing the same white coat when I saw him. Now, this was 20 years after the incident, and there was no way that I knew that he had been wearing that type of an outfit ever. So it really freaked me out, and frankly, it still freaks me the fuck out right now. But that really happened to me. I died, saw my grandfather's angel or ghost. He sent me back here, and for the last 56 years I've still been shaking my head in wonder about the day that I died. July 30th, 1967. Have you ever heard a story like that before? It's the truth. It happened just like that. God bless you all. Goodbye.